Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 35 of the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. For anybody who's brand new, that's on top of 150 episodes in the archive with the old version of the podcast, my good friend and former co-host Dean Guido. So it's stacking up. I guess we're approaching 200 in the grand scheme of things. But today I've got a guest that I've been excited to have on for a while. I've been following Dr. DiFrancesco's work, and it's cool to actually get to talk to you for the first time. It's one of the cool things about this podcast. I get to selfishly grab someone for an hour and pick their brain and hang out and connect, and everybody else just kind of gets to listen along. So, and I usually introduce myself at first, but if you're again new, I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Pleasure to have you guys on here. So, Tim, you are, amongst other things, a doctor of physical therapy, and you own your facility. Now you're down in Salem, Massachusetts. And that's, if I want to make sure I get this right, it's TD Athletes Edge.
Yep.
And you also have the claim to fame to be the former head strength conditioning coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. So I know you probably get a lot of questions about it. So I don't want to do the whole like, oh, what's it like, working with, blah, 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 ex superstar. Forget that nonsense, right? I'm sure you get tons of that. But we know that a lot of trainers in the industry they aspire to train athletes, right? Pro athletes, especially. And we know that the new trainer coming in, that's a pretty ambitious goal, right? So I want to throw anything out there that you want with this, but what are some of the unglamorous realities that these trainers need to be prepared for? And what practical advice would you give trainers who are interested in working with athletes?
Yeah, I think that as you say, the unglamorous parts of it, when you're talking about it, there's sort of two different avenues there. So there's the avenue of working with, high performance athletes that are on roster and you are employed by that team. And then there's doing that, working with those same athletes, but from a private sector avenue. So, from my experience in the, working for a team aspect of things, there's a couple things. I as I've said to a lot of people, just sort of debriefing on my experience as the head strength and conditioning coach with the Lakers for 6 seasons. One of the things is the travel that you don't, really sort of, it's hard to estimate ahead of time from that front. And, I think that with that, I really, the best way I describe that is, and I tip my cap to the athletes doing it, because just as a support staff member, obviously your role is hugely valuable, but you're not expected to go out there and play 48 minutes the next night on the floor. So that travel aspect is not always as glamorous as it sounds, especially in basketball, where in a normal NBA season, you are into a city just enough time to put your bag down, not necessarily to unpack it, and it's time to move on from there. So it's like, I think a lot of people think it's like, yeah, but that's got to be awesome to go to these great cities and get to experience them. And not really. You have enough time to get to the hotel, put your bags down, figure out who needs what, get them what they need, go to the game, and get on a plane and go to another one. And so there's that aspect from the working with the athlete's standpoint. I mean, depending on the league, depending on the organization you're with, but especially depending on the league you're in, you've got guaranteed contracts. You've got 19, 20, 21-year-old kids that you're working with who have guaranteed huge contracts. It's not always the first thing on the top of their mind to say, I better make sure I get my lifting session in for the day. And so, I think people would be surprised. Look, the locker room is going to be like society. It's going to be split up into a group of 30% of the locker room is going to be true craftsmen, people who want to get every drop out of what they do and be their best all the time. You're not going to have to babysit those people. You're going to have 30% of the people that are going to do what it takes, just at the level of I'm doing everything that's asked of me, not more. And you're going to have 30% who are, just doing it to keep you off of their case, but they're going to probably do a little under what's expected. And you got to go find them once in a while. You're going to have 10% who really don't care and are not interested in doing any of what it takes. They are just, kind of skating by and getting their paychecks and that kind of thing. And so there's that part that's not as glamorous, which is I think a lot of people think that 100% of the locker room of the roster are just clamoring at the door to get everything they could out of the weight room and go from there. So, you're doing a little babysitting.
There's some imagery we'll often see in the industry, and I'll give you some examples that you'll obviously know about. So what you just described was from the working for the team aspect. And we'll also get a lot of stuff from a guy like Brett Bartholomew, who talks extensively about managing the different personalities in the room.
Yep.
His book, Conscious Coaching, is a really good example of that. But then we've got Ben Bruno is maybe the highest profile example of this, who's working with Klay Thompson and other members, I think, of the Golden State Warriors. And Ben fell into these connections. Another one is my friend Sam Pogue, who I'm guessing you probably know. Everybody knows Sam. Sam's like super network guy, working with Jake Arrieta for a long time in the industry. And I mean, I've had for a few years a young WHL hockey player. I mean, up in Edmonton, Alberta, I haven't been in a position where I've gotten exposed to a lot of, high level athletes. And I trained some young athletes, and that's about it. But that was through, I used to train his ex stepmom, and then I trained his dad. And then when he was 16 years old, his dad brought him to me, right, working with him, and me and Blake are really good pals, right? He's 18 now. And then, some other, another WHL kid and his dad, they came to me, and you end up with these relationships more based on your personal, professional network through people who just happen to be high level athletes. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Ben, he certainly has got a reputation, Ben Bruno, for working with high level people. Fuck, he's training Justin Timberlake and Chelsea.
Right.
So I think that's also coming from personal connections. And then Sam Pogue will tell the story about how he just met Jake Arrieta and just formed a relationship with him. So I think these examples are kind of luck. You have to put yourself in a position to be skilled and reputable to handle everyday people and high performance athletes. But sometimes it's just falling into it, especially when you're the guy hired by the athlete who's serious. Any thoughts to that?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be in the right place at the right time, but doing the right stuff. And so I think that there's no doubt about it that things have to align just right for you to, have the opportunity to connect into, being there to step into one of those roles with one of those athletes. I think that you put yourself in a position to fall into that luck in some ways, as your, decisions you make, choices you make, levels of effort you put out toward things, and that kind of thing. So I think it's a combination. But the other part of it is I tell people all the time, entry level people in the field, is like, stop worrying about who might be the beacon or the flagship person of your roster of trainees that would have bragging rights behind their name before you ever step foot into an opportunity like that. You better have a big long track record of being really credible and reputable with high school athletes, with middle school athletes, with college athletes that are playing Division III, who nobody will ever see or hear from a sports standpoint. And if your goal is to be in and around and training those people, just go train for free as many high school, college, or middle school athletes as you can find in your area. It's like, how do you get started? How do you get your foot in the door? Well, first of all, you just better start being known for training athletes. And I think that what I've found is, if you're putting maximum effort into something that you really enjoy doing, good things follow. And that luck starts to happen more often. So, but you have to create it. It's like, people aren't just going to know. The universe isn't going to know that you are sitting on your couch and saying, like, I really want to train athletes. Go train athletes, whatever it takes. Go tell them, go up to a bunch of coaches in your area and say, hey, could I come and do dynamic warm-ups for your players before practice? I mean, anything, to get your foot into that door. And eventually what happens, you do that for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, all of a sudden you've collected all these people, and people start asking you, hey, do you do side stuff? Do you do what outside of, I love the warm-ups you're doing with our team. Like, can you train me outside of here? All of a sudden, blah, blah, blah. And then you get connected in these athlete circles and, you know, good things happen.
So you obviously worked for the Lakers for 6 years, and now you have your own facility. And it feels like maybe that was a progression. Does that allow you obviously to get off the road? You're the one who calls the shots. I've lost video on you, so I'm just gonna make sure I still have you. Sorry, guys. Looks like I've lost him for a second here. See if we get him back.
Gotcha. Sorry about that.
All good. Won't even worry about editing that out. No, that's not going to be a big deal. So what I was getting at is like I keep this pretty low key, right? Low maintenance. So you now have your own facility. You go home to your family every evening instead of traveling on the road with the team. Was that a natural progression you envisioned, or is that just something that you had to pivot to? And any expanded thoughts on that career progression?
That was always option A for me. That was that's always been the vision. The Lakers actually happened more by accident than anything else. And so back to your prior question is, the Lakers thing, TD Athletes Edge and what I get to play out on a daily basis within that vision. And as I say, I get to play in my sandbox every day. That has been something that I've been sort of, chipping away at and chiseling into form for as long as I can really remember. And so along the way, I had an opportunity to go out and be the head strength and conditioning coach and athletic trainer with the Bakersfield Jam in the NBA D League at the time, now the G League, where basically I took a $60,000 pay cut off of my clinic PT job and a flyer on an opportunity from my former high school basketball coach to go and be the head strength coach and athletic trainer with the team in the D League. But again, I took that job because I felt like it brought credibility to what I was trying to build within TD Athletes Edge. So I get out there, I'm doing my thing. Couple of Lakers players get sent down as players do in the NBA to get some extra development, and good things happen. They had a great experience. The head athletic trainer with the Lakers likes what happened and is starting to kind of try to understand my background a little better. And suddenly at the same time has a opening for a head strength conditioning coach position for the Lakers. And so Gary Vitti at the time, the head athletic trainer, who is legendary, was the Lakers head athletic trainer for 28 years and went to 12 finals, has 8 rings, calls and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a guy that knows PT but wants to be a strength coach. And it sounds like that could be you. What do you think?" And I, obviously say I can start yesterday, and off we went. But for me, really the Lakers thing was the pivot. And the brief pause that I took to be really actively building the TD Athletes Edge vision and dream. And, I didn't know exactly when I first took the Lakers job how that was all going to play out, because it's kind of one of those pinnacle positions. And you say, well, I don't know, is this going to mean a pause for good at TD Athletes Edge, or is this going to be, because I had started it before that came about. And, really after about 2 to 3 years within the Lakers position, I kind of knew it's like, okay, this is it's real. Like if I'm the head strength coach of the Lakers and I'm still sort of getting that inkling and that burning desire to build out what I want to play out with TD Athletes Edge, then you kind of know that's really the thing that gives you goosebumps. And so there's going to be a time where it comes to get back to that. And 6 years in, had an opportunity to either stay or move on from the Lakers strength coach position when the new management took over. Was grateful to have the opportunity. Sometimes people don't even get that opportunity in those instances, but to either stay or go, it's sometimes not your choice. But really kind of wanted to be fair to me, fair to them, and say, look, my heart is where my heart is. I've got stuff I want to do with TD Athletes Edge, and this is a good time for me to break away. So really the pivot was the Lakers, and the piece that's always been a constant for me is, really bring getting the most out of the vision I see with TD Athletes Edge.
And you're obviously in the same space as a lot of other these reputable, legendary fitness facilities in the New England area. We talked about Cressy Sports Performance,
Yeah.
and Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning,
Yep.
at the very least, right? So, and those guys especially have had high level athletes coming to them working on, on Cressy's terms, on Mike's terms. And so you're doing the same sort of thing. So now it's not like you're cutting off the relationship with anybody in that world. You can just say, listen, this is where I'm going to be. This is what I'm going to do. And you can work with, you get to cherry pick the people who are the most serious and the up and coming athletes who really give a shit the most.
Yeah.
You got to cut off the top, that percentage are the ones who are just going through the motions or really just don't want to be there.
Right.
So it actually sounds kind of like a perfect deal. I mean, you get Cressy turn around and get hired by the New York Yankees anyway, but I'm sure that was probably far more on his terms than,
absolutely
usually is the case, right? Given his reputation as having both the NL and the AL Cy Young Award winner. I think it was 2017 with Kluber.
Right.
You get to call your shots in a situation like that, but that's the exception.
No doubt.
So I don't know if there's any other additional thoughts about that particular.
Yeah. I think that from my end, here's how I look at it is, we have the word athlete in our name. We're certainly, we have, we have, like, for instance, we have Calvin Cater, who's one of the top featherweights in the UFC right now. We have some great athletes that we're working with in-house, all from time to time, like you said, pick my spots and go out and work with people that maybe aren't getting to Salem, Massachusetts, that kind of thing. But like, and I can say this because I've done both of them, and it's absolutely true, is I get the same level of satisfaction whether I am working with Kobe Bryant or whether I am working with, Kevin from UPS, and, he's got a bum knee and it's interrupting his job, his ability to do his job. I don't know that I could have said that and known it before I took the Lakers job, because I hadn't played out the sort of high profile end of that equation, but I have now, and it doesn't feel any different for me. I do think that some people take those positions for the logo on the polo shirt, so to speak. I never did. And so for me, it's, we're here to help, like you said, those people that are really invested in getting into the nuanced aspect of how to do things the right way, from a return to play or a become a monster standpoint. And, those people will find us, and, or, we will be there for those people. And it is the scenario where it's a lot different feel when your entire membership is built on those people, versus that locker room scenario where you got 30, 30, 30, and 10 that is, sort of defining their investment to the process.
There's another thought embedded in all this stuff too that's worth mentioning, is how in some of the examples I explained, we often highlight on our media our quote stars, our athletes, our high profile people. And that can inadvertently leave the impression that either we don't work with or care as much about our everyday people, or potentially could leave the everyday people feeling like, well, all they really care about is their stars. And I've seen this play out. Now, in the case of Sam Pogue, Sam doesn't work with a lot of people. He's just had a long-standing relationship with Jake Arrieta. That's a little different.
Yeah.
And I think with Ben Bruno, I mean, he trains a lot of high-profile people. There's also the aspect that most of our clientele probably don't necessarily want to be put on social media on display, especially if you've got a larger following. Many of my clients, I probably have, upwards of 40 clients semi-active who, that most of them are kind of private. I have one guy, it's my 7-year-old Larry, who everybody is in love with. He's really strong, and I put him up all the time, but he's a little bit more gay, and everybody loves him. And, I always let the other clients know, hey guys, like, I'd love to showcase your highlights and whatever too. But most of them are kind of like, no, I feel, I never pressure them, because I never want them like they have to go on my media. And they're very happy just privately, quietly doing their own thing. But Larry, he likes it. He enjoys it, but I don't give him a choice. if he's going to like do
Right.
single max deadlift or whatever, it's going, he's 5'4" and he's sturdy as hell. So he can actually do that.
Right.
And it inspires people and they love it. So there is that walking a fine line between not necessarily making everybody feel like what we really care about is just this 1-star person. And I certainly won't say the names, but I've seen it where media really seems like, you know, a facility owner or a trainer just seems to only give a shit about this 1-star person.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you know, there's a fine, you just have to KYP, you know, as you talked about, I summarize it into know your personnel. You know, I think there are some people that you'll work with who, boy, it would mean the world for them. They would, you know, really get a kick out of it if you felt like, hey, what you're doing right now is something that you'd like to highlight to the rest of people watching and things like that. I think there's a majority of sort of that private sector Gen Pop audience who is really not, they prefer not to be kind of showcased. They're not going to the gym. You know, if anything, they're going to the gym and it's kind of their time to do their thing and not be, you know, in a different medium of things. So yeah, I think that it is a fine line. A lot of times I like to let even on the pro side of, you know, members that I work with, it's like, I like to let them say, hey, let's get a pick after this, or let's, you know, that kind of thing. And then once they break the ice with it, then it's like, okay, this is clearly something that they're pretty comfortable with, because sometimes even asking is like, you know, it can, if you do it too early, too much, too soon with a person, it's like, okay, what's this guy's agenda, you know, here? And so it's a tricky thing. I always like it to come from them the first time around. And then, you know, there's also a generational thing that you brought up too, which is, you know, most of the, you know, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds are dying to get up on the IG story somewhere with a mention and that kind of thing. So, you know, it's KYP.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I sort of lost my train of thought there for a second. I'm trying to bring it back a bit. But what I'll do is I'll pivot on to the next thing that actually is related to this anyway. And it's, you know, a couple of your articles that you've had up on your social media that you've written for your business. Let's see. One was on resistance training and age proofing your body. And another one was on cognitive benefits of resistance training.
Yeah.
So, and I actually have a lot of social media posts that hit on these notes too. And sort of the thought that I have is, and this will open up, this is nuanced. I mean, are we actually just talking into an echo chamber of the people who already share these beliefs and ideas anyway? Are we actually making an impact? Are we reaching the people that need to get these messages? And, you know, how can we, any trainer who's out there trying to do this, get this message into the hands of the people who need it most?
So I think that I would hypothesize that 80% of most people, you know, working with a coach, a trainer, and or even going to the gym, are really thinking about, you know, this is healthy for me. It's good for my heart. It's good for my muscles. Doc said, break a sweat 3 times a week. You know, I want to do it with a really reputable person. I want to do it with a person that has a good background, the environment I enjoy in. So that's why I show up to the place I show up. I think there's that much room for kind of education into, yeah, but there's so much more you're getting out of this. And, you know, I think with that end, it's one of the things that makes a great coach. There's a lot of good coaches, great coaches. They have an ability to help their trainees understand the why behind the process. You know, it's not good enough to say, well, trust me, trust the process, right? I mean, there needs to be buy-in. They need to trust the process, but in order for them to trust the process, they have to understand the methods and then why these methods are so what all the value can be from these methods before they just sort of blindly say, okay, I trust you, I'll do that bear crawl, and it seems ridiculous, but I have no idea why you're making me do this. And it's a lot easier for somebody to be very, very invested and get more out of what they're doing when it's like, I know exactly what I'm getting out of this. There's tons of benefits to this. If somebody says, well, yeah, the bear crawl is hard as fuck, and so I feel, I feel just like, if you have somebody who likes to feel like they go through the meat grinder on an exercise, well, that might be good enough for that person, but that's not everybody. And for some people, it might be helpful to explain to them. I actually went through this with one of our members just the other day, is like, hey, look, don't underestimate what's going on here on an exercise like the bear crawl, where, think about it. We don't do a lot of, from the moment we can walk, we don't do a lot of weight bearing through our upper body. So think about how healthy this is for our long bones of our upper extremities, for our shoulder girdles, for all this stuff that's happening. Don't forget, like, yeah, you're gassed when you're done with that 40-yard bear crawl, but think about all the benefit to the bones, the tendons, the ligaments that just happened right there. So to your point of those articles that I put out in the commentary you put out regularly on the idea of like cognitive benefits, stuff like that, I think it's just all the more kind of fodder for that those people that are they know it's good for them. They know for sure it's good for them. They know they're probably doing something good for their muscles. Maybe, burning the calories is important for some, break the sweat, feel the burn. But if we stop at that and assume that they know all the nuances that we know of this, then I think that you underserve your own credibility and your ability to get them truly invested and help them to get the most out of it when they understand how all that works. It's like this whole new world of like why this is such a big part of their life and why they want it to get done. I honestly find that one of the best ways to to the latter part of your question, one of the best ways to get folks to really grasp this is to begin conversations about, what are happening in the 23 hours outside of this session with me, because two things happen right there. First, shows you care about them beyond the hour that they scheduled with you. Second, it starts to get them to link how performance is happening and how they're feeling in those 3 hours that they're not with you, to what, to the process, and it becomes this much more comprehensive, really connected process versus, yeah, 3 times a week for an hour, I do the thing with Andrew and it's awesome. And I feel really taxed after it. And then I go back to my business. But, outside of that, I don't know what the connection is.
I think an important thing that tacks onto that is we have to be patient with, like, we want to change the world. I know we all want to change the world, right? We have to be patient, and it's one person at a time. You serve the person in front of you with world-class care, experience, knowledge. And then my hope is that that person is talking about it with the people in their life. I mean, this is the referral that we're all trying to build anyway, right? And it serves that purpose. If we can get someone's, a good example in my world is my client, Teresa. So Teresa has been with me for 10 years. I started with her son's best friend, who's still a good friend of mine this day. And then his name is Kyle. And then Kyle sent me Teresa's son, Ryan. And then Ryan brought me Teresa's other son, Corey, Ryan's brother. And then Teresa started training with me. Now, Teresa's been nonstop, and the various people through this network have been with me for long periods of time. Teresa's son, Ryan, is still one of my closest friends. He moved away. And then I got their dad, and then I got a dad's coworker, and then I got the original guy, Kyle's coworker. And then all of a sudden, 2 of Teresa's sister-in-laws and one of the nieces and another niece and the niece's boyfriend and a family friend and other friends. And it's added up to over 20 people across 10 plus years. And part of it's because Teresa is such a living example of strength and success and energy. And she's a real maven and advocate for this whole process, that she's almost single-handedly turned her entire family and friend network onto a more active lifestyle. And there's that benefit. It doesn't always work like that, but the hope is on the aggregate, through all the people we work with, our reputation name gets out there and keeps us busy, but we're having a cascading influence on more and more people all the time. And if you magnify that across every credible, talented trainer, caring trainer across our entire network, everybody who follows my social media, follows your social media, everyone who does one of Dean Somerset's courses or is plugging into Mike Isertel's work with Renaissance periodization, and you take that across the entire industry, I'm hoping that the magnifying effect of all that reaches more and more and more people, so that we have a greater number of the population who are understanding the benefits of all this, experiencing it, and sharing it with other people.
Well, and think about it, because I mean, it's a huge responsibility. I think that, the more people we have who carry this hammer, of strength and conditioning, of fitness, exercise, and prescription of it, who understand the gravity of it, the better. Because it's, to me, and I say this as a doctor of physical therapy, I look at it two ways. There's active strategies toward health. There's passive strategies towards health and rehab and recovery. So, the passive strategies are necessary at points where you need some manual therapy, where you need, different, more, stretch type action, where it's not involving a muscle contraction as much and that kind of thing. But the active strategies, namely load bearing, lifting heavy stuff, moving heavy things the right way, learning to move your body better, that kind of thing, are the tried and true. Those are the things that are, if you just lay the evidence on the table, you can't argue it in terms of what this does for from a carpenter standpoint of the body. It's, the support structures, the bones, tendons, ligaments, the soft tissue muscles as well, and things like that. But then the software aspect of our body, as we talked about, the cognitive benefits of all this, these are the things, this is the hammer that does that. And it's why early on in my career as a dual and try certified, individual, as coming up through, I was certified athletic trainer, I was doctor of physical therapy, CSCS. And so, that's why I was more than happy. I was not only more than happy, it was the only place I felt comfortable was to be looked at as a prescriber of strength, prescriber of how to get strong, prescriber of exercise, much more than I wanted to be looked at as a athletic trainer, a strength coach, or a physical therapist.
Are there any thoughts, and I'll open it up, just any broad thoughts about scope of practice in the industry where you have all of those qualifications, and how you have trainers who are probably, we know that there's graying of the lines between physical therapy and personal training. It just, you have a lot of people, educators who are of physical therapy backgrounds. My friend Sam Spinelli is a great example. You're a great example, Dr. John Russin. And there are others who are teaching trainers movement, right? You have, Gray Cook's book Movement, and just up and down, Bill Hartman, you name it. There's just so many people out there who are educating the fitness industry. Any thoughts on the blurring of those lines or anything constructive about that? I'll just leave it wide open to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way that I look at it is there's a lot more that I learned anyways on how to prescribe exercise from any of my self-driven education background or, curriculum-based backgrounds in the areas of strength and conditioning, and exercise physiology, kinesiology, those areas, than I did from what tends to be often, at least when I was coming through the curriculum. Now, this is seeming to change a little bit within curriculum of physical therapy curriculums, but those tended to be, at least from my experience, more focused on the passive application of treatment. And so I think that it's you definitely, the part where it's important to realize is, look, let's not get caught up, as long as we're not going against the law, so to speak, of what is, this outside the scope of, if you're not a licensed physical therapist and you're doing manipulations on somebody, well, obviously now we're into something far different. But when it comes to prescribing exercise, I think the important part is, you don't have to be a physical therapist to do that at a high level, and you don't have to be a strength and conditioning coach to do that at a high level. You have to understand, though, how to speak both of those sides of the coin. You have to be able to have a conversation with experts in each of those areas, and however you developed that literacy in that, it doesn't have to mean you have to be a licensed physical therapist to do that by any means. And most of the time, I don't even find that that's a huge advantage. And so I think it's just, I look at it very simply is there's a big, long spectrum of nobody that you're ever going to work with from a personal training standpoint, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, that end of things is ever going to be driving around with a brand new car off the lot unless you work with infants. So you better be able to understand what happens when pathology is involved. And know when and where it's beyond your understanding and or scope of expertise, and then shorten the, or I guess you could look at it as expand out over time your understanding of what happens when that comes into the equation of, okay, my knee hurts, what do I do? Because that's going to come up daily in a busy training facility, to say we have to stop the trains and send that person to a physical therapist is ridiculous, in my opinion. And why shouldn't we all, licensed physical therapist or certified strength and conditioning coach, one, the other, both, why shouldn't we all be able to hit that moment, be relatively on the same page? And at the end of the day, the whole point is to help the end user get through that instance. And I think the biggest thing is, if you're not a licensed physical therapist, just know when hands-on manual-based therapy or evaluation skills that maybe aren't in your toolbox at this stage are needed for the situation.
A couple of thoughts that I always like to throw there. First of all, if I'm going to refer my clients out to physiotherapists, I want to have someone who's really skilled or knowledgeable in strength and conditioning. I've got a couple of guys local. Darren Bishop is one, and Dr. Jason Dick. I've sent a lot of my clients to these two guys, and they're fantastic at it. I've got a few others, but these guys really know that end of things, and they can handle it. Now, there are going to be physical therapists who are specialized in pelvic floor health and other things, and so yeah, if it's a different area, fine. But that's really important to me. I think I value the physical therapy community that sees the value in educating the population, the personal training population, because I found that world has been pretty good about embracing general fitness and personal training as a means to collaborate and educate. While we do see some registered dietitians who are pretty good about getting into the fitness industry and seeing it collaboratively, I find on average more times the registered dietitian community, again, not everybody, but on average, they tend to view personal trainers in a more antagonistic light. And I think it's to their own detriment, which has made them less accessible to the general population. The ones who are clever enough to do this have benefited from it, because there's a lot of room to educate trainers on nutrition.
Yeah.
So I find that physical therapists on average have been a little bit better as a community in seeing the positives in having a relationship with the personal training industry.
Yeah, I can say this, though, to tag on to that. I think you're right. I also think that although there's some that have taken the time to really understand exercise prescription at a higher level than I believe PT school and curriculum gives you, I don't think PTs tend to be overall awesome at exercise prescription. And when I say that, I think PTs are typically good at concocting or coming up with and creating new exercises that might, or positions that might help in that acute phase of rehab. But where I find PTs to be deficient often, and the great PTs know this, and they say, I have a great strength coach. I have a great trainer who knows way more about what to do next than I do. And I admit this, just as that same trainer better be saying, look, if you came to me on day one of this acute knee injury that you suffered on the field, and you have you're laying there with a torn ACL and LCL, I'm not the guy or gal to help you with this. You got to go to my PT, who's awesome. They're going to get you the table set for you and go from there. It's just not what is really in the background or the curriculum, I find, of, when it's time to return to play, so to speak. And I use that term very loosely. It can really mean anything. It does not have to have anything to do with a rostered sport. That's the moment where I think a lot of PTs struggle. The great PTs that I know admit that, and they have a great strength coach or trainer that they refer to at that moment.
I think another thing I have to be aware of, even when I say this stuff, is the examples we've been using, yourself, Sam Spinelli, John Russ, and you guys have all those qualifications. You are dual coach and physical therapist. In fact, John Russell has been on the podcast saying that despite the fact he has his doctorate in physical therapy, he's never practiced as a PT. He's only practiced as a strength coach. And Sam Spinelli is certainly a very, very skilled and experienced strength coach, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, it makes sense that they're in this, personal training space, the fitness industry, as educators. And I think that maybe that's a bit more of that smart ambition that those people like yourself have jumped onto. Whereas I think we have a little bit more of a divide between the RDs and the PTs.
Well, that's a really good point. And yeah, not one that I really have a lot of insight into why that divide has happened so much. But I agree. There's much less productive turf war going on there.
I liken it to this. I see that, and again, I don't want to speak in generalizations, but we know that a lot of the RD community has this antagonistic view, feeling that personal trainers are encroaching on their space with doing nutrition with clients. And guess what? A lot of that still is within personal training scope of practice, depending on your
right.
Florida, yeah, sure, don't touch it. But here, it often is as simple as don't prescribe nutrition to treat disease. Deal directly with eating disorders, and don't give meal plans. Now, we know a lot of people in the bodybuilding community with no fucking credentials are still giving meal plans, right? I don't complain about them. It's pointless. Not even gonna do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of like the music industry when streaming started, Napster came around, and the music industry got crushed and eradicated by and large because they were deliberate on doubling down on maintaining the status quo of their business versus embracing the changes that were coming. And they spent more time fighting the downloaders in the courts, trying to sue them, than they were about looking at opportunities. How can we change this business model? It's Blockbuster digging in its heels while Netflix cut them off at the knees, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
And I think the wiser ones, and again, there are a lot of RDs who work in clinical settings, and that's a little bit different. But I think some of the really forward-thinking ones see, okay, the greatest access to opportunity is through general fitness. And who is that? The fitness industry.
Right.
I hear kids in the background.
Yeah, they're home. How was soccer?
Awesome. I don't want to keep you too much longer.
No, we're good. Yeah, keep cruising. Whatever you got.
So I've got one more thing I was going to throw at you, and this would be a bit general.
Let's go.
Gives you a chance to unload. But do you have any practical wisdom, perhaps something that's not always discussed, or perhaps a little unconventional, you feel would help a fitness career? And in particular, we get a lot of trainers who are doing this, and we know that maybe they're at risk of being transient and then moving on to something else. I'm thinking, do we have any, anything that helps people make this their long-term career and thrive?
Yeah. So, I think I think there's a lot of places I could go with this, but it's very, very important to, I'll give something a little more able to put a fork and knife into in a second. But I do think the most critical piece here is your ability to be enjoyable to be around, to relate to people. That's going to make you have this be a long-term, have the ability, if you want to, if you choose to make this long-term, it's going to end things real quickly if you're more worried about your sharpening your programming skills than you are your people skills. And so, I think that's a friend of mine, and stay tuned. This product is this book is just coming out. Jesse Wright, who was the strength coach and performance specialist for many years with the Philadelphia 76ers, is coming out with a great resource and book on the soft skills. And so, really pay attention to this. But that is, to me, one of the huge underpinning common denominators of anybody who ends up making a long-term go at this. I also think that you need to early on begin a filtering process of creating your methodology. So in years 1, 2, 3, no big deal. If you shouldn't have your methodology figured out at the time, but you better be starting to think about what the filter is that's going to create your methodology. And it's easy to get 10 years into the process and be like, wow, I mean, somebody stops you dead in your tracks and says, what's your philosophy? What are your methods of coming up with a program? Like, I don't know. I kind of just I just figure it out. Like, I get people to feel the burn and break the sweat, and there better be more to it than that, from a results standpoint, from a credibility standpoint, but also from an efficiency standpoint. This can be a grinder of a profession. If you don't have a system to follow, a methodology to follow, and something that you go by, that's hard to continue to sort of reinvent your wheel every time. And yeah, there you go. Exactly.
I was going to use this as an example. I just held up Alan Cosgrove and Frank Rasmussen's Secrets of Successful Program Design, which I think is actually a great book. And as you were saying that, I had to think for a second. I'm like, I've never written in a formulaic, comprehensive manner my framework the way you described, but it's very, very firm in my mind as to how I approach everything. I actually start every person that I work with, regardless if they're an athlete, weight loss client, dealing with injuries, you name it, try to put on muscle from a foundation of strength, so that way they're getting stronger, and then you apply that out to what their goals are. If it's weight loss or muscle building, you also layer in nutrition. But it goes to your first point. It's developing such a great relationship with a person that they develop consistency, so that they are either with you or love the experience long term. And those are really core pieces of my fundamental philosophy. So if you're listening and thinking, well, I've never written this down, guess what? You don't have to, as long as it's pretty firm in your identity as a trainer. The book I just mentioned, especially if you're within the first few years of your career, I'm enjoying it, and I'm on year 11. So that's a fucking good book. There's a lot of good shit in that book.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that, I've had to do this because I have, currently we're up to 6 full-time coaches on our staff. And so, we need to prescribe our methodology seamlessly, or else we may as well just be a bunch of independent contractors. We're not a team. And so one exercise you can do is, even if you don't have a team that you're managing, or that you're in charge of, or that you're working on amongst, ask yourself, if tomorrow I had to hire somebody and I wanted them to train this the way that I train so that it comes across seamlessly, could I describe that to them? Could I take them through my methodology? And can I articulate that? Because when you make yourself do that, you actually solidify points that you knew, but maybe never really kind of really cemented in your thought processes. You just have been doing it on autopilot for so long, you never even think about it. You also uncover avenues that you never even realized. And it can be a really powerful exercise. And I think by year 3, you should definitely be able to execute that exercise, whether you're trying to build a team of seamless exercise prescribers, as we could call them, or it's just going to be you in a solo gig. Either way, you should be able to articulate that.
That's brilliant. I actually never heard anybody in 185 episodes bring up that particular point. By the way, everyone, if you hear a little hammering and stuff going on, I'm having some renos done on my house. One of my best friends is doing putting in a bar and bought a bunch of bookshelves and everything. Like, Tim can see my books in the background. I got a whole bunch of strength and conditioning stuff and other general reading. But kind of too, there's this section is a lot of strength and conditioning stuff. Now, a bunch of my books are laying around other places. I've got Science and Principles of Strength Training here on the desk, New Functional Training for Sport by Boyle over here. But a lot of my books are on softer skill stuff.
Yeah.
And if you are that PT who is trying to read everything under the sun on movement mechanics and programming, you're probably going to miss out on what I think is, agree with you, is actually more essential, is the stuff that will make you better at your relationships.
Yeah.
And the stuff that's going to be better at the psychology of human behavior, change, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And sales. Fuck it. I mean, most trainers don't know shit about their business side of what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, which is why I talk about a guy like Pete Dupuis a lot, because the guy's great at that stuff.
No doubt. No doubt. So, yeah, I mean, I think, understand that you should have a philosophy. You should have a methodology to your philosophy. Those are two different things. Your philosophy is something you can articulate in a few sentences. This is my philosophy of how I approach training. Your methodology is you should be able to, you should think of it almost as existing in a handbook. This, if this, then that. This is how I start. This is what I do at part 2. When I get to the final stage, this happens, that kind of thing. And I just think that if you've put a foundation of focus on the soft skills, you're golden. But even then, you could be the best soft skill person in the business. If you don't have a philosophy and a methodology to it, it's hard. It's hard to deliver time and time again and get consistent results.
Let's leave it off on there. Let's tell everybody where to find you.
Perfect. Quickest, easiest, best way, at TD Athletes Edge, TD Athletes Edge, all one word, on Instagram. I am the same handle on Twitter. Fairly active on each one, and especially active from a response standpoint within DMs on Instagram. So reach out, check in. I love that kind of stuff. You can head over to our website, www.tdathletesedge.com, and check out our blog there, and different things that we're doing over there as well. But yeah, those are the quickest, easiest ways. And I am I'm in those places and active on those places because I like to be social. So don't hesitate. Don't be bashful. Check in.
I've noticed that you are responsive, because I can't pinpoint the exact point, because I've heard your name around for a while. I kept with the exactness of, hey, I've got to follow you and plug into what you're doing. And I've noticed that you're following right back and interactive. And it's just, I think you just find people through the ether when your stuff is out, published and whatnot. So, but yeah, you've been super. I was thrilled to have you on. It's been something I've wanted to do for a while. If you listening, if you're finding my podcast for the first time through Tim, through his media, then what I would say is, I have to earn your interest in listening to anything more of what I've done here. So scroll through, especially the more recent episodes under the rebrand of Lift Free, Diet Hard, and you will find me talking to Pete Dupuis, Tony Gentlecore, Mike Isertel, and a lot of other really reputable people in the industry. These are, I go out of my way to connect with industry leaders, so you bring you interesting and nuanced conversations, and not the same old general questions I think that guys like you tend to get on these podcasts. So I appreciate you taking an hour out of your time. I know you got your kids to go hang out with. This has been a pleasure. And for everybody listening, thank you again. If you're not already following me on Instagram, come on, guys, seriously. Andrew Coates Fitness on Instagram. All roads of my stuff lead through there, including the podcast. And thanks, and stay tuned. I've got another interview to do very shortly, but I appreciate being here.
Andrew, my pleasure. Let's do it again soon. I loved it.
Done.